So next, I'm going to work on generating my PM2.5 data files. So I need to go back to the left side of the form here and make some changes because my PM2.5 monitor is located at a different site than my ozone monitor. So first I need to change my site ID. So my PM2.5 monitor is at 0002. My sampler ID is INPM25. This is POC3. My parameter is, these are the things I enter when I set up my sampler with my AQS monitor protocol data. These are the things I entered in the previous module. My method is the MAN. My units, and notice I have 2 units here. Micrograms per cubic meter is the units of my pollutant concentration data, and then for my QC check, I have flow rates in liters per minute. That's why we had to enter those 2 units in the previous module. So I want to start with my pollutant concentration data file, my RD file. So I will select that. And my sample duration is 1 hour. Now I need to change my date range here. And let me check my notes and make sure I have the correct date range. So my logbook says 1/5/2015 through 1/19/2015. So I highlight these and type over them. And then I have the option of assigning 0 value continuous pollutant records if there were gaps in my data. However, as with my ozone data, I don't have complete days yet in my toolbox, so I don't want to do that. So I'm going to skip that step, and I go down to the select AQS format type, and I'm going to leave the default of pipe delimited because that's what I'm comfortable with. And now I have the option of assigning AQS flags, and for my PM2.5 data, I'd like to do that because what I want to do is tell AQS that some of my data were less than the MDL. You don't have to do this. So let's see how this works. So if I want to flag data that's less than the MDL, that's a quality assurance type of flag. So I select quality assurance. And then I click on the manually add AQS flags button. So there's also informational only, and there's request exclusion options. And what those flags have to do with are events. So for example, high winds, fires, etc. that might affect your concentration data. The request exclusion flags, they're the same flags as the informational only flags. However, by doing the request exclusion, you're asking AQS to exclude the data. So there's additional steps you need to do in AQS if you assign an exceptional event flag. I'm going to do quality assurance, so I select that, and then I click on the manually add AQS flags button. So that opens up this query that shows all of my data for PM2.5, and it also shows the Toolbox flag, the AQS null code flag, and the AQS flag. So notice here we have a Toolbox flag, and we don't have anything in AQS null code or AQS flag. So nothing's going to show up in the AQS ready file for flagging because it only has a Toolbox flag. In this third one, we have an AQS null value code. So this data has been invalidated, and it shows up as a null data point. So what I want to do is, for these ones that have an R flag and that are below the MDL, I want to add an AQS flag because this Toolbox flag of R is not going to show up in the AQS ready file. So I want to add an AQS flag that will show up in the AQS ready file. So to do that, I click on the row that I want to flag, and I keep clicking the AQS flag column. So then I can use this drop-down box and select an appropriate AQS flag for this data point. So this is, like I said, below the MDL. So there's this one that says value less than the MDL. So I click on that, and now I have an AQS flag for that particular data point. And notice it didn't invalidate the data. So the data is still there and still showing as 1. And it just has an AQS flag now. In contrast, when you add an AQS null code, invalidates the data and it's shown as a null. And remember, you can only add AQS null value codes in the final data validation step. So you can't add AQS null value codes here. The only thing you can do here is add AQS flags. So I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut here because I want to copy this previous flag to the next record. So I've got another record that's below the MDL here. So I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut to copy that. And that is Control''. So on my keyboard, I press the Control key, and then I press the apostrophe key, and that copies that flag to the next record. So I'm going to go through and do this for all of my data that's below the MDL. So this one I can't use the Control' shortcut since I don't have anything in the previous record. So I need to select it again. So I select that flag, and now I can use keyboard shortcut to copy these flags into the next records. So here's another one that's below the MDL. So I keep doing this. And there's another one. And now we're getting into the error with the tape error. So these are already invalidated due to the tape error. So all of these are invalidated. Notice there's nothing in the concentration field because of that tape error that happened. And these are HD6, so I don't want to add any flags for those because those are just values that are above 6 from the previous value, and I don't want to add any AQS flags for those. I'm only looking for values that are below the MDL. So here's some more. And I can tell those because there are values, which means they're out of range values that the toolbox flagged. And these ones are duplicates. So that looks like I got them all. And then what I should do is I should go through and count these and then record in my database logbook how many flags I added. So I would record in my database logbook the number of MD AQS flags I added and write that down. So now that I've done that, I can close this screen by clicking on the lower X. And I can move on to inspecting the data. So let's take a look at the data. So let's click on the Inspect Data button. And here's the report. Like, this is the same report I showed you for ozone, but now we've got our PM2.5 data in it. And notice the third record I invalidated. So I've got a null value for the concentration, and I've got AQS null value code for that. And if I scroll down, you'll see here. So here's where I added the AQS flags. Notice that we still have concentration values because this is not an AQS null value code. This is just an AQS flag. So that is the very important difference between an AQS null value code and an AQS flag. AQS null value code, there is a null value for the concentration. AQS flags, the concentration value is still there. So that's the important difference between those two things. Here's the data I invalidated due to the tape error. And I just keep scrolling through this data to make sure it looks good. And it does to me, so I can go ahead and close this report by clicking on the lower X button and move on to create the AQS-RD file. So I click on this button, and again, it asks me what folder I want to save it, and since I've already done save into this folder, it defaults to that particular folder, so I'm in the right folder. And here's the file name. So it's an RD file, a raw data file. Here's the AQS site, the parameter code, and the dates of the data in the AQS ready file. So I say that looks good to me. Go ahead and save it. And it tells me I saved it, and here's where it's at and the name of the file. So I say okay, and now I'm going to view the AQS-RD file for my PM2.5 data. So here is how the data look in the AQS pipe delimited format. Again, notice the third record is invalidated with the AQS null value code of AN, and there is not a sample value here. In contrast, here's where I added the AQS flag of MD for those that are below the MDL, and the values are still shown here as 1 and -1. So that's the difference between the AQS null code and the AQS flags. So I scroll through my data, make sure it looks good. Again, here's the big invalidation due to the tape error. Everything looks good here. So as long as everything looks good, I can go ahead and close the file. And now we have a PM2.5 raw data file that's ready to be submitted to AQS. I can move down to my quality assurance data for my PM2.5 sampler and go ahead and generate a file for submission to AQS for that. So let's do the type of assessment. And again, like I said, with the ozone data, this looks familiar because this type of assessment field was also on the QC form. So this is the same values that are on the QC form. And for PM2.5, we've got two options. We've got a flow rate verification and a semi-annual flow rate audit. So the flow rate verifications are what you do with your own instrumentation. They're the checks you do possibly monthly or bi-weekly. And then the semi-annual flow rate audit is when someone comes in with outside equipment and does the audit and the flow checks for you. So far, I've only entered flow rate verifications into the toolbox for my particular imaginary PM2.5 sampler. So I select flow rate verification. And then I click on inspect data. And I get this message box. So this message box says incorrect unit selection. So it tells me the selected unit is not a flow rate unit. Select the appropriate flow rate unit in the reported units field to continue. So I forgot to change the flow rate to the unit here from my concentration unit to my flow rate unit. So I need to click OK on this. And I need to change this to my flow rate verification unit. So I'm going to click on liters per minute because that's what I use for my flow rate verification. So I need to do that. And now let's click on the inspect data again and see if anything changes. So now it tells me about the co-located sampler. I don't have any co-located samplers in my particular imaginary imaginary air monitoring site. So I just read this and say, okay, I don't have any co-located. So I'm just going to say, okay. And then it opens up this screen where it shows me my flow rate verification. So it has the known value and the measured value for my flow rates. And they're in the correct units, so we're all good. So I close this by clicking on the lower X button. And then I go ahead and create the AQS QA file. And again, by default, it goes to the last folder I used, which is AQS imports, and that's where I want it to go. And it shows the file name, and like this one is flow rate verification, so it has an FV here, and it gives you the site ID, the parameter code for PM2.5, and the date range of the data in the AQS ready file. So I click save. And it tells me where the file can be found. I say, okay. And then I can view it. So here's how the file looks. Just the two flow rate verifications I have entered so far, and that's what I want. So this file is now ready to submit to AQS as well. So I can close this screen by clicking on this X button. And then if I had a semi-annual flow rate audit entered into the toolbox, I can use this semi-annual flow rate audit selection and do this again, but I don't have any of that entered in the toolbox yet, so I can move on.